Okay, let's dive straight into this explainer. We are looking at what is honestly one of the most bizarre and highly consequential political domino effects in recent UK history. Seriously, a single, hyper-local by-election in a northwest town called Makerfield could literally install a new prime minister, completely rewrite the ruling party's stance on Europe, and plunge the entire government into a state of absolute limbo. It is wild.
Here is exactly how we're going to unpack this political thriller. Step 1, a high-stakes local election. Step 2, reopening the EU debate. Step 3, the local voter dilemma. Step 4, path to number 10. And finally, Step 5, the mandate problem.
So, Section 1, a high-stakes local election? Now you might be wondering, can you actually become prime minister without being a sitting MP? I mean, it sounds like a trick question, right? But looking at the rules of UK politics, you technically only need to command the confidence of members of parliament to be PM. You don't strictly have to sit in the House of Commons yourself. And suddenly, this obscure little constitutional quirk is the absolute center of British politics, all because of one guy, Andy Burnham. The current mayor of Greater Manchester is heavily tipped to run in this Makerfield by-election, and it changes everything.
And there is actual historical precedent for this. If we go way back to 1828, the Duke of Wellington was Prime Minister while sitting in the House of Lords. But a much better comparison is 1963. Alec Douglas Home literally disclaimed his earldom and spent a few weeks as PM without sitting in either house before finally winning a by-election to get into the Commons. So what we're looking at with Andy Burnham is basically being dubbed a reverse Douglas Home. If he wins Makerfield, it's a stepping stone straight back into the Commons, positioning him perfectly to grab that MP confidence and make a direct play for number 10.
Moving on to Section 2, reopening the EU debate.
This is where a massive policy grenade gets thrown into the mix. Look at this statement from West Streeting, which, by the way, Andy Burnham has echoed in the past. After a solid decade where British politics was totally consumed by leaving the European Union, having a potential future leader say the quiet part out loud that they actually want to rejoin is a monumental shift. It completely changes what this local by-election is actually fighting over. What this exposes is a really deep, fundamental split within the ruling party. On one hand, you've got the rejoiners setting their sights on a long-term return to the EU. But on the other hand, you have the pragmatists. Figures like Lisa Nandy are arguing that the focus has to be on fixing the current deal's economic damage, without, dragging the country back into those exhausting circular Brexit arguments. She makes a really strong point that suddenly making Europe the main focus again just tells voters in towns like hers that their actual struggles, deindustrialization, falling living standards, are just being ignored all over again.
Which brings us perfectly to Section 3, the local voter dilemma.
Because on the ground in Makerfield, the reality is stark. A decade ago, this was one of the highest leave voting constituencies in the whole country. So talk about a nutcracker dilemma. You've got a rejoiner candidate walking into an area that voted overwhelmingly the other way. Now, to be fair, polling from places like More in Common shows Burnham is incredibly popular in the Northwest, way more popular than his party overall. He's what you might call a vibes politician. People just really like the guy. But make no mistake, those historical voting patterns, that is a huge vulnerability. And you better believe every other party is ready to pounce on this. Reform UK is absolutely throwing the kitchen sink at this by-election to capture that Leave vote. Over on the Conservative side, Kemi Badenoch is using the chaos to paint the current government as totally paralyzed and hurtling the wrong way with zero plan. Even the Greens are wrapped up in the drama, internally split on whether to even put up a candidate. It is a literal free-for-all right now. But here's the thing. To win Makerfield, you have to truly get the hyper-local culture. Take the scrap farm, for example. National commentators actually sparked local outrage recently by confusing a standard chip roll with a scrap farm, which, for the record, is a bread roll specifically filled with crispy batter scraps from the chippy. It sounds like funny trivia, but Makerfield is this proud in-betweeny place that fiercely guards its identity from both Manchester and Liverpool. Knowing the local lingo, having genuine ties, like Burnham being a massive Everton fan, honestly, that kind of stuff might carry way more weight at the ballot box than national policy debates.
All right, let's shift gears to Section 4, path to number 10.
So where does this leave Keir Starmer? Well, right now, he's navigating this incredibly weird limbo. His premiership is basically stuck in purgatory. MPs are almost openly assuming a leadership contest is right around the corner, yet he's still the prime minister. He's still trying to pass laws, still awkwardly standing up at prime minister's questions.
but he really can't make any major moves until the Makerfield result drops, which totally paralyzes the government's momentum. Because if Andy Burnham pulls off a win here, a faction in his party wants to push for a rapid coronation. They're looking at a very specific four-step sequence. Burnham wins Makerfield, he enters the Commons, Starmer steps aside, and Burnham is effectively just handed the keys to number 10. The thinking is that a strong win in a tough spot like Makerfield proves he's the only guy who can lead them out of this mess.
But that leads us to our final point, Section 5, the mandate problem. Here's the constitutional headache. A prime minister usually relies on two types of mandates. You have your party mandate, where you survive a rigorous contest to be chosen by your MPs and members, and you have a public mandate, where the country actually votes for you in a general election. If Andy Burnham gets swept into power through a quick coronation off the back of a single local by-election, well, he effectively has neither. And his opponents will instantly point to Gordon Brown. We all remember the political damage Brown took because he stepped in midterm without winning a general election himself. But Burnham's situation would actually be way more extreme. He'd be facing a double mandate problem. If there's no leadership contest, he hasn't been chosen by the national electorate, and he hasn't even been officially chosen by his own party's membership. I mean, that is an absolute gift to the opposition. They will immediately demand an early general election. So I'm going to leave you with this final thought to ponder from today's explainer. If the dominoes fall, and the voters of one single town effectively decide the destiny of the entire nation, is that a fascinating example of localized democracy in action? Or is it just a constitutional crisis waiting to happen? Thanks for joining me to unpack the Makerfield domino effect. Keep your eyes on the Northwest, folks, because the future of the country might just depend on it.